we're now going to call up to the podium, I think, our esteemed panel. So Chris Hammond from Northwestern, Beth Hayden from Spot Hero, Tom South from Northern Trust, and Rajeev Tummala from HSBC. If you could please join me up on the stage. Wherever you like. Jump in. All right. So I'm going to go through a few questions for the panel, but certainly.
One person not Mike. So
aha. We need a. There we go. Thank you. Especially since you have the second question, that would be bad. Okay. So I have a bunch of prepared questions, but if anyone has burning questions, jump in and we'll just sort of take it as we go. So Tom, I'm going to start off with you as our host here at Northern Trust. What are you most excited about with respect to AI?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for having me up here today. And I know I probably got on the panel partly because you just had the party at my house, right? So you drink my alcohol, you eat my food. At some point I get the invite.
And the food's excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome. I made it myself, David. So, I should give some kind of wonderful, insightful answer about the impact in financial services, but that actually isn't probably what excites me the most. And I would say if Gary's still here, I am super excited about his tech, but I also get a little trepidation about removing all the engineers, since that's what I was for a long time. But I think for me, the macro, and it's too bad Kayun wasn't here today. I think she's if you haven't met her, she has a lot of optimism about the long-term effects of AI, and she sort of converted me. So I get really excited, David, about I think Mark had the paradigm yesterday of the automation, the augmentation, and the additive components. I'm right now in the near term thinking about augmentation and the idea of just healthcare alone, the outcomes that could be brought to people that can't get access to the kind of quality care I might be able to get here in Chicago. We have two of the finest medical learning institutions in the world, and in walking distance almost. And so I can get access to great educated opinions on the most cutting edge data. But the idea that you could build an AI that could deliver that to people that don't have access to that. I think about the same thing in education over time, and a bunch of, I think about health and education, the kind of things that lift up societies on a long-term basis. So I'd love for a really localized financial services answer, but that's not what excites me. Obviously, making the world a better place through these technologies give me a lot of hope. I know you haven't asked this question, but I also have a lot of trepidation about the separation of the haves and have-nots in the world. Much of we talked about in the roundtable, the developed world is seeing these impacts already. I'm not so sure that's happening in the less developed world. So that's a nagging concern for me, is the distance between us gets greater rather than these lift everybody up, lift all boats kind of concept.
Yeah, and we'll come back to what to be worried about in just a bit. But that's a great point that, these there are so few chips available. NVIDIA's got this quota system. If you're not on their list of favored countries, you're not getting chips from them. So Beth, is AI more of a threat or an opportunity for Spot Hero, and why?
So we're a marketplace tech business, and we have on one side our operator partners, and we have our consumer drivers, and we bring them together in a reservation system, hopefully at a good rate and a great experience with cashless payments and a gate that goes up when it's supposed to and goes down when it's supposed to. There is a lot of money going into parking right now. 1.8 billion just went into taking one of our top partners, SP Plus, private. And that's all around AI technology. So from a business standpoint, I would say very, very likely a great opportunity. That's just one of many of our partners. And in many ways, we have the best, as a leader in the space, the best customer data of anyone. So I'm super excited about that. And then internally, I think it's a great tool, and we're really curious about it. So I would say on both sides of that, more of an opportunity than a threat.
Great. And Chris, we started to talk about this a little bit yesterday. What are we getting wrong about AI?
Well, I think two things. One, we think it's one thing. It's not one thing. And I've had people ask me questions about, how, getting into AI as though this is something they did yesterday. It's been with us for decades. And so there's that problem.
Yeah, and elaborate on that. It's one thing.
Recommendation systems are AI. Google search is driven underneath it by AI, making inferences about what you really want as opposed to what you typed in. Anything that looks like predictive analytics AI, resume filtering AI, the information delivery AI, so you've interacted. Forgetting about the whole language model thing, you've interacted with an AI system at least a dozen times today, at least. When Gmail tells you, oh, here are the 3 responses, it's AI. It's reading your mail and making suggestions. And we keep thinking it's this one thing, it's this one big box, and we're going to have a box over here, and how we're going to deal with that box. It's not that. And the problem with making that mistake is that now we're trying to fix the problems with language models. And there are 1,000 problems that we are now ignoring. And we've ignored for decades. I was very late, 2 speakers ago. It was Peter was like saying he was sorry he was going to depress everybody. I'm really going to depress everybody. 7% rise in depression rates of young women between ages of 17 and 27 because of social media and curation and filtering and how things are delivered. A rise in online addiction because of the engagement models and the ability to profile somebody and give them what they need in that moment to keep them there. And this I always love this. The impact of recommendation systems on the erosion of human decision-making skills. So your children and their children will not have the same level of human agency that you do, because they have lived a life of trying to make decisions, and every time they make a decision, there's a recommendation engine telling them what the decision should be. And it's easier to go along. And although it's not really annoying, it's not much more than annoying when you're looking at Netflix and getting that. When you go to LinkedIn, that's a little bit more focused. And you go to eHarmony. And given that 7% of the relationships in the long-term relationships in the States now are mediated through the machine, and I don't mean the swipe left or right, but things like eHarmony and Match.com. That means that we are having the machine in the middle of making decisions about who we are going to be with.
Oh, so sometimes people promote that, right? There's the NYU professor who created a digital twin of himself that went out and responded to all the online dating ads and then found his wife. And it actually handled the first part of the conversation.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. But there are different policies in terms of relationships. You could have a policy that is that you want people to be matched up with people who they will like, but are dissimilar enough so that we will actually spread out and become more homogeneous as a society, or much more culturally attached so that we can have clear cultural groups that are maintained. I'm not saying which one is the best policy, but underneath the system.
Someone's deciding if we have AI eugenics.
Actually, not someone. The policies could be implicit, but unless we unpack things, we'll never know. And so we're living in this world of actually ongoing. And I mean, by the way, I love AI. I mean, I really love AI. But the reality is that because we're so focused on today's big problem, and everyone's saying, well, how can we regulate? It's the newest thing in the world. It's like, why don't you think about what happened yesterday? And all these problems that have accreted over time that we haven't responded to. But if we don't do something, we will find ourselves happily buying the books and products that Amazon suggests, getting married to the lovely people that Match.com suggests, and consuming the media that fits us because the system is not only suggesting things for us, but actually training us to like things. So that's, I think, the problem.
What we're getting. It's one thing. Yeah. So Rajeev, not to put you on the spot here after Chris telling us how we're entering the Terminator future.
No, I'm sorry. That's not
the Matrix future.
No, it's a lot of little things.
Yeah,
it's a lot of little things.
Yeah, but how can we help people sort of manage the transition to augmentation with AI? So how can we have it be an easier sort of adaptation?
So transition, right? So I think the first aspect in the enterprise is when something new comes, there are two things, right? Everybody thinks it can deliver everything to them, and then there is a lot of scarcity and fear as well. And everybody thinks that their job is at risk. And at the senior levels, people will simply ask, depending on which magazine they read on the aeroplane into the meeting, they'll just say, oh, I read that, so why are we not doing it? So, and AI is fortunately, I would say fortunately, a lot of little things. So how do you approach educating about any new technology, and especially AI, is first, your organization has to understand in the right levels the implications and what can it do. And the simple thing is to sort of explain AI is many little things, and we have already been doing some of these things. And that would then the gap between the mainstream news about AI and an enterprise is every enterprise focuses on a domain. And largely the educated leadership in the organization is about drawing and connecting the dots, drawing the lines and connecting the dots, saying that if this is what is the capability of the technology, AI, how does it apply to my domain? And that is primarily the first step in helping people transition. Actually, 80% of the organization needs to understand the implication of AI to their domain. Then you can sort of help manage the transition well. And increasingly, right, so in enterprises, we are seeing that technology is becoming at least everybody's job, right? So if you go back a decade back, it used to be an IT department, and then they could not even differentiate when I started out. The person whose job is to maintain networks from business applications to your desktops, everybody was IT. But IT is also many little different things, right? So, and now I think the organizations are a lot more aware. And I always talk in my organization about what is the digital IQ of a team, right? So you have IQ, you have EQ, but there's also a technology or a digital IQ of a team, right? And like everything else, we are on a curve. And by engaging people on newer things, you are helping them find where they are, right? They don't need to be at the top of the curve. They need to know where they are. Once you know the gap, you can address, right? So, I mean, this is, again, right, hardest thing in an organization is managing change. So this is all about, again, if you have ever written code and committed to source code, like GitHub, so they would say that if you want to make a change, make the change easy, and then the easy change can be made. So it's about setting the context, understanding the implication of AI to your domain, and then looking at, okay, what aspects of your business domain can be compressed using that particular capability. Then it becomes sort of simpler, and you can transition in and out, reskill. But I do believe largely that, again, a lot of my exposure and experience is from Asia. There's so much of headroom for growth that any new technology actually creates capacity to harness that particular growth. And that's why I am more positive about it. It brings inclusion. It brings accessibility into the have-nots. And that's what excites me about new technology. So I think enterprises, especially in Asia, will be adopting anything that is new at a much faster pace because of the growth angle. I do think there is growth in that particular region, and 90% of the growth is going to come through with accessibility and inclusion. And AI will be a driver for that.
Great. Well, and now I'm going to, okay. So I'm now going to pose a question first to Beth and then to Chris. How will we grow the people to help make AI better?
Well, I think this is a great opportunity. We're all in the discovery phase, and it's important to us to look for people with a few qualities around the mindset that this will take, learning agility, and then experimentation and curiosity. So think about what Sam was showing us earlier about how inaccurate some of the data is. How do you now take critical thinking that would have been applied to a different problem set before AI was here to help us as a learning tool, and looking for people who use AI in practical ways? You know, I like what you were saying. It's a lot of different things. And I think those qualities, we should not necessarily think this is a drastic change. This is an enhancement. And I love that concept of additive. And so how do we take those qualities of a mindset around curiosity, experimentation, critical thinking, and elevate them?
Okay. Chris?
I mean, I think that, there's a very straightforward approach, and that is you decide that it's going to be there. So Northwestern, actually, we are engaged in a AI Everywhere initiative. And it's going to be really, really expensive. And the idea is to completely and utterly transform education and research at Northwestern University. And that means that every student, every faculty member, every researcher will be trained in the AI that will be useful for them for their field of study. And they won't be developers. They won't even be product people. They will be people who are doing their jobs, doing their work, but understand the tools that surround them. And the notion here is really that there's a world that is growing, and we want to make sure that every single lawyer who comes out of Pritzker understands the implications of AI to the law. Every single MD coming out of Feinberg understands the utilization of AI in their field. And stop thinking about it in terms of, oh, everyone's got to be AI literate. No, they don't have to be AI literate. They have to be literate in their area and the utility of these tools in their area. And right now, it's like we have, for me, I teach classes at the law school. I teach classes at Medill. I teach classes over at Kellogg in not AI as a technology, but AI as a functionality. And once you get the idea of, oh, there are these functional things I can do, then you have the tasks that you care about, and you can look in an expanded toolbox. And if every single university, and they will, would get on board with the idea that this is not going to go away, and we need to train people in a functional approach to how to use these technologies to change things, to transform the world, and make things better, then we'll be fine. But it's getting people away from the idea of, well, this is a passing fad, and this is going to fade, and we've seen it before. It's like, not this. From my perspective, I've seen AI transform other fields before, and I've seen technologies. We almost destroyed journalism, but technologies impact other fields in the past. This is the first time I've seen a new technology transform AI. It's transforming my field, and if you don't accept that, you will miss it. And for me, we're building a slide deck right now for the president and the provost because the president wants this, but we're sort of giving him tools. And it's like, if we pause, we fail. That's it. It's not, this is something that'd be lovely to have. If we pause,
just wait and see. You have to be in there.
No, and this is actually a crucial issue. That is to say, I will often ask a group, who here has not used ChatGPT? And there'll be people who raise their hand. It's like, why not? It's like, oh, well, I can't think of a use case for it. It's like, you've never touched it. You've never touched it. And if you haven't touched it, that you won't be able to understand the use case. Once you touch it, you'll understand it. I'm not saying use it. I'm just saying be aware of it. And we don't need more. I don't think we're going to need more engineers. We're going to need more people who can talk to engineers and actually understand the technology at a functional level. Because you really don't want to, look at how do you do high-speed matrix multiplication. It's so much fun.
So I'm going to ask first Tom and then Rajeev to weigh in. Where do enterprises need help around AI? Like top three.
Yeah, well, we had a conversation yesterday, a scarcity conversation, David, I think you partly provoked. And at least for me, and I'll be curious what other answers are, we're not out trying to buy NVIDIA chips or like, we're looking at the kind of big platforms that have already done a lot of their work. I think it comes down to the human component to it, right? The number of folks, and to Chris's point, I don't need people to understand attention and matrix calculus and all the predictor components that go into this and the learning component. They've got to become literate in how to interact with these technologies to get leverage, right? And I think enterprises are firmly stuck, at least in my view, firmly stuck in the automation. If I talked about that I think it was Mark's automation, augmentation and additive. I think a lot of enterprises have, in my opinion, recalibrated how long it's going to take them to see real value, bottom line and top line value. And I think they're focused on automation. And I think we're, like a lot of firms, struggling for enough people to understand the technology to be able to make use of it in a way that's safe, secure, all those things we talked about. We're depending on institutions to make sure they're producing enough graduates that can kind of start to fill that gap over time. But I think there's a substantial human capital gap right now.
Rajeev?
I think while we are all talking about implications of AI, right, the first place a lot of institutions, enterprises who need help is getting their data story right. Because without data, you can't harness the capability of this technology in a meaningful way. And if you primarily look at any large enterprise, they might have a data strategy that is currently being executed, right, in various phases of maturity. But first, I think where they will need to get the maximum out of this, they'll need to get their data right? They need to have access to clean data with high integrity for their domain. Again, right? Let's go back to the domain, and they need to get that thing right. Then I think there is definitely scarcity of capability. I think largely there is scarcity of capability, but I also think, like with any hype curve, there's a lot of speculation. I believe that speculation is important in the adoption because speculation installs capacity. That's what it does. It will definitely, like every S-curve that we have seen, speculation is an important part of adoption because speculation installs capacity. And then, the bubble bursts and the capability becomes commodity, and then we all go out in use. But in this particular phase, you need speculation, you need hype, because without that, capital would not come in to install capacity. It happened in the late 1990s, right? So the dot-com hype installed a lot of bandwidth. And that's how Web 2.0 came through. Without that, there is no Web 2.0. Similar thing is, I think, is happening in the current thing. You need speculation because then it will be hot. A lot of people will learn. And maybe this time is slightly different. It will be a slightly longer curve. But this is required for us to gain access to capability that is scarce, both hardware, people skills, everything. And once we get these two things right, I do think, then there will be a paradigm shift, I think, in terms of how we do things. A bank can probably operate. So there will be a number of institutions, I think, while there will be additive AI, but you will be able to do a lot more, maybe 2, 3x, multiple times more, with either same or 10% less staff. Mm-hmm. That is primarily I would say, now what will that additional capacity help economies in, right? So we always think that the idling capacity would not do anything, but I do think idling capacity will find a way to be productive. And that's when further new things will come.
So I have more questions, but I want to give the audience a chance. If they have questions they want to ask this, Ben, over here on the...
After Peter's
I'm a little worried that our next generation has loneliness and depression. We've seen it already with COVID, of course. But there was a quote in Proximity, a famous book that you should all have, about Aristotle saying the importance of music and art. And how do we really reach people with AI, but do it in a way that we're doing it in a healthy manner, including things so that we don't end up with what was the word you used? A generation that does not have as much agency as we have now. That's frightening after I heard you say that. So what should we do? More art, more music, couple it. Here's eHarmony. And with this is also a subscription to CSO. I don't know. I'd like to hear your thoughts.
All right. Who's got an answer on humane?
I'll take that, right? So I want to fundamentally disagree with, we might not use our agency as much on things that we used in the past. And that would, in fact, with AI, you need more critical, not less critical thinking. If you begin to use, right?
Sure, but
that would be nice to have empirically, we've seen a reduction in decision-making skills. It's just empirical. It's not a thing of discussion.
So how do we make people happier when they're using AI?
And it would be nice. I think you need critical skills to use generative models. You need to understand what it is you want, so you can actually craft your prompt structure, and you need to be able to look at the output and evaluate that. But that's what you need. It's not what will happen. And besides everything else, if I have an incredibly convincing, and they're built to be convincing. If I have an incredibly convincing system that's telling me things, and it even, when I say it's wrong, it even apologizes to me, and then tells me another thing that's usually wrong. And it's really sweet and kind to me. I'm going to be listening to it. It is really hard to develop all those critical skills. And almost every model, after it goes through the initial training and it has a refinement, they are refined around persuasiveness and confidence. And so we have things that might not be telling the truth, and they're persuasive and confident about it. And that's a genuinely dangerous thing.
Let me jump in here because I want to make sure. Tom has an answer, and then I'll have an answer to close this.
I'm not sure there's a complete answer, but we're actually making the concern worse, in that I think the erosion of decision-making skills, and add into it, Chris, I know you've probably seen some of this, the studies that have shown that the more younger you are, the more likely you are to believe the AI. Right? Yeah. You've grown up with the confidence of the recommendation engine.
So how do we fix this?
There's one silver lining, I think, and it's pretty recent development, but it's going to grow. I actually short on predictions, but I predict it'll be the fastest growing space commercially in the next 12 months. You look at the announcement from OpenAI a couple weeks ago. It wasn't accidental that they harvested a voice very similar to Scarlett Johansson's, and that this thing became much more of a voice interaction and emotive. And in places of the world where young people whose I think mental health has been eroded by social media and things like that, they're starting to find increased mental health outcomes from having a companion. Now, I may think that's weird to have a digital companion in whom I express my secrets and share, but they're not just having an individual companion. There are kids that are getting on social text circles, kind of Snapchat circles with them and their companion. They have a name for. It's got an avatar. It's got all these things, and they're interacting. And the AI is interacting with the friends, and they're all comfortable with it. And this need for companionship, particularly for young people, and the level of the effects of isolation are starting to see some positive impacts from very early stages of emotive AIs. So I concur with all the negatives that you're thinking and Chris and others are thinking about, but there's some silver lining, I think, coming to that. And I expect that social component of this to grow very quickly.
There's a very specific thing. And that is that if you build an AI system, there's the model itself and its responses, but then there's how it's framed with regard to how you're interacting with it. And if it's framed as, here is what you should do, or here is what the answer is, then your tendency is to go along. If it's framed as I need you to think about this, and so this might be the answer. Here are three possible answers, and you have to decide between, where what the system itself actually elevates our thinking into a much more mindful, thoughtful, straightforward decision-making mode. That is a huge difference. Facial recognition systems are horrible right now in terms of like policing, because they say here's the answer, but if they said here's the answer, and by the way, here are 5 others, and some of these are wrong, you have to do the work to figure out which one's right. That means you have to think harder, and we keep thinking that AI systems are going to make it so we have to think less. It's like, no, the ones that will work well are the ones that make us think better.
So
And that is the governance question of the model, right?
Yeah. So I think we're
not yet there.
We're at time here. I will say, do we have time to run a little over? Or I think we're on a clock. Yeah, 1 minute. Okay. I'll offer two slightly different thoughts on this. One is we actually can use AI to help people collaborate better and get along better. So there are systems we've been developing based on applied cognitive social science integrated with AI that let people do things better together. So it's not just you have an AI companion, you have a people companion, but you're getting along better. The second is come see me at the break and I'll tell you about the happiness project. So with that, do we want to do a lightning round with the panelists each? So
one quick thing to add that we can all be part of in our communities, make sure music and arts stays in the education system. And as an employer, we're talking about who we select. Look for people who have those skills because they're highly transferable into machine learning and some other things we're talking about. But if we're not valuing those skills as well and that experience, then it could disappear. I mean, I think that's really important as well.
Yeah, so we're at time now? Yeah. Okay.
Well, do the quick round.
Yeah, so we're going to run down the line briefly. What's one thing that you would like to leave everyone with today on this discussion? Rajeev?
I think there will definitely be some negatives, but I believe there will be more positive to come out from capacity creation.
I actually think that AI done right can improve us as a species. Done wrong, it's been nice being around.
Tom?
Follow that. Wow. I go back to my first point. The opportunity for good is as large or larger than the opportunity for bad. But there are people like this and a bunch of others that you can't just be a spectator, right? And to the best point, you got to value the things you value and reflect in our activities.
Beth, take the last word.
It's an enhancement, acceleration of learning.
All right. Thank you to our panel. This was great.